Burnout is caused by workplace stuff. So it's these symptoms that look like depression, but have a fundamental root in workplace related things and like workplace interactions. So the first thing I want to talk about today is someone cross-posted this from the anti-work subreddit. And what they kind of posted is this tweet, which is a truly dystopian part of all of this, are the chipper email reminders from schools and workplaces reminding people to tend to their mental health while doing absolutely nothing to make that possible. So I think this tweet is actually like really important because it speaks to a fundamental problem. And I think one of the biggest scams that's currently being perpetrated against people about kind of burnout and mental wellness. So what I mean by that is like there's something going on right now, which is like very subtle and is actually like society wide. Oh shit. Which I think is a real problem. Okay. And the biggest problem right now that I think is happening with burnout is that people are placing the responsibility of burnout on the individual. So this is something that's like very subtle, but like, for example, the World Health Organization has recently, they like coined like this kind of diagnosis that's burnout. So a lot of people are sort of talking about burnout. And if you really think about it, there's a huge problem because burnout affects the individual, right? So the way that we talk about this problem is very individual oriented. So we say that, all of these like issues of workplace mental health, like the mental health is like within the person. Burnout happens to a person. And so there's a subtle problem that's going on. There's a very subtle scam going on, which is that once you kind of label it as an individual problem, you say, oh, you're burnt out, like go get a diagnosis from a psychiatrist. And then you work on it as a person, as an individual. What's happening is there's a very subtle, drastic, and catastrophic shift of responsibility from the workplace to the individual. And I think this is incredibly damaging. So this has happened before. So if you look at addiction, this is another big area where like this kind of thing happened. So 40 years ago, if you were addicted to cigarettes, like what was the solution to you being addicted to cigarettes? It was a personal solution, right? It was like, go to a doctor, and then like doctors will prescribe medications to help you get off of cigarettes, like stuff like Chantix and things like that. It's like, here, use this Nicorette replacement gum, like use this gum. Like basically the problem of you being addicted to something is an individual problem. We also see this with opiate usage, right? Where like there's a diagnosis of opiate use disorder. So people get addicted to opiates. And then the burden of fixing that problem falls to the individual. I think the big catastrophic mistake that happened in all of these situations is that there was a very real ignorance or avoidance of a systemic responsibility. So we now know through like various investigations and like even lawsuits and stuff that like the opioid crisis in the United States is not there because of a failing of like millions of individuals to get off of opiates, right? The opioid crisis in this country was created by a systemic change where like doctors were overprescribing opiates by an industry that was sort of like saying, hey, this isn't a problem. This is really great. Everyone should use this. Okay. And so I think that what the same exact thing is actually happening with like workplace mental health and burnout, where what's happening is we're saying like, oh, people are burnt out. So like companies are going to their HR departments and they're saying like, hey, employees are worrying about burnout. Like people are really concerned about it. Like, what should we do? And then the HR folks, like in a sense, they don't really know better, right? So they're doing is like, okay, so like, let's give people access to a meditation app. Let's send them daily email reminders to tell them to take care of their mental health. But if you look at all of those solutions, the burden of responsibility is being placed on the individual. And what's kind of interesting is by placing the burden of responsibility on the individual, the industry is sort of getting a pass. And this is a huge problem because the truth of burnout, and if you go back to the original like research on burnout, was done by someone named Maslach. And what Maslach basically determined, so like quick history lesson on burnout, is Maslach said, hey, there's this thing called burnout, and it like causes people to be not empathic. It causes people to lose motivation. It causes people to like, have difficulty like doing things. And so what the psychological and psychiatric community said when Maslow basically coined the term burnout and said, hey, there's this burnout syndrome, they said, well, how is this different from depression, right? Because in psychiatry, what we tend to do when someone says, hey, I've discovered a new thing, what the automatic response is like, how is this thing new? Like, because we know about depression. It sounds like what you're describing is depression. And what Maslow defined burnout as is he said, yeah, it's very similar, but there's a key difference. Burnout is caused by workplace stuff. So it's these symptoms that look like depression, but have a fundamental root in workplace-related things and like workplace interactions. So even if you look at the World Health Organization definition of burnout, it relates to workplace-related stuff. And this is really, really important because there's a very subtle thing that happens here, which is that when we start diagnosing individuals with burnout, even if it's workplace-related stuff, we are still shifting the blame and the responsibility of burnout to the individual as opposed to the workplace. And this is something that like I've seen time and time and time again, where when I deal with burnout, and I've done a lot of work on burnout, what we tend to find is that like burnout is not caused, generally speaking, by individual factors. It's caused by workplace-related factors. So I'm going to give you guys an example from medicine. So doctors tend to work really, really hard, right? So we tend to work hard. We like study hard. Like we study for, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. In residency, we work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And the interesting thing is that most doctors are actually like okay with that. They're okay with doing that kind of work. If you ask doctors why they're burnt out, it's not actually working a lot. It's not the number of hours. It's the kind of work that they're forced to do. So I'll give you guys just an example. This is something that I find incredibly frustrating. So I can work with patients for 60 hours a day, but what I absolutely hate is arguing with insurance companies for 10 hours a day. So this is where like, if I think my patient needs a particular medication, what I have to do is like, I may prescribe it, but then like the insurance company says, we're sorry, we're not going to pay for that medication. We don't think your patient needs it. Instead, we're going to give them this other medication, and this is what we're willing to pay for. And so then what I have to do is spend like an hour calling the insurance company, and they do this on purpose, by the way. They don't make the process of getting expensive medication for their patients easy. They make it hard because they understand that for every hour, the harder they make it for me to get the medication for my patient, the less likely I am to actually like advocate for more expensive medication. So they place artificial barriers that are quite high, requiring me to fill out forms, spend time on the phone, talk to someone else, and justify my decision. And keep in mind, it's not like I'm justifying the decision to a medical doctor, right? It's like someone who's got like a business degree who's saying this is our protocol and this is what we're going to pay for. And so that's the kind of stuff that burns me out. So what we understand is that like burnout is not caused by an individual problem. It's not like the person is lazy or they're just not taking care of themselves. Burnout tends to be caused by people who want to do a good job, who are placed in situations where doing a good job is very, very difficult. And so what's happening right now is when people when workplaces will do stuff like, okay, like, hey, here's an email to kind of take care of yourself. Here's a subscription to a meditation app, and this is our solution, right? And so what the company then does is they check the box. They're like, okay, this is our employee wellness initiative, and we've checked the box. And the cool thing about our employee wellness initiative is that we value wellness and we care about our employees. But don't ask us to actually change anything at work, because that's ridiculous. It's silly, right? The solution to employee wellness is the burden is on the employees. We're going to help you. We're going to be such good employers, and we're going to give you the subscription to this meditation app so that you can meditate in your free time, and that way you'll be less burnt out. Good job, right? Strong work. And the thing is, this is the huge problem, right? Because now what we're having is a society that is assuming that wellness is a combination of meditation apps, like chia seed pudding, and home delivery food services that allow you to cook stuff. The burden of wellness is being placed on the individual. And and the message that we get is it's the workplace doesn't need to change anything. What needs to happen is you need to eat more chia seed pudding, you need to do yoga every day, and you need to meditate, and that's the solution. It's your fault that you're burnt out because you're not taking care of your mental wellness well enough. It's not our fault as an industry. We're not contributing to this. It's if you do these things, this is the solution. And this is the biggest scam that's being perpetrated against us, right? Is this idea that burnout, which Maslach defined as a workplace-related thing, that the solution is on the side of the individual. And this sort of makes sense in terms of what's happening in the world, because I don't know if you guys get this, but like meditation apps are on the rise. Chia seed pudding is on the rise. Yoga is on the rise. All of these things are far more accessible than they've ever been. And you would think that if these things were actually effective, we would see a decrease in the level of burnout. But what we actually see is the opposite, that burnout is getting worse despite the wellness industry booming. So like, what's the problem here? The problem is that all of the solutions that we have to burnout are not actually targeting the root of the problem, which is a workplace-related thing. And so like, this is where, I know it sounds crazy, but like, this is a big part of how you successfully deal with burnout, is you have to target the workplace-related stuff. So a couple years ago, I was running this program called the SMART program, which so the SMART program is the Stress Management and Resilience Training Program. It's for physicians, and it's out of this place called the Benson Henry Institute at Harvard Medical School. So I was running this program for a couple of years. It was created by a predecessor of mine who was awesome and brilliant and very forward-thinking. And so what we did is we took 600 doctors a year and we put them through this resilience training program. And here's what we even did it for free. So here's what we found, is that when we went to a hospital and we're like, hey, we have this program for you that will like help your staff, your doctors be like less burnt out. And the people would be like, oh, that's great. Like, can you do the program? We were like, yeah, we'll do the program. And then they're like, okay, what does it cost? And we're like, it doesn't cost anything. Well, we're happy to do it because we're just here to try to support like, resident physicians. And so they were all for it. And when did we get pushback? We got pushback when we said, hey, if you guys want to do this program, you have to make it a part of your resident physician's regular workday. So we're happy to do the program, but for 2 hours once a week, the people in the program need to be excused from work, because what everyone wanted to do is like tack it on to the end, right? They're like, okay, you're gonna work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. because those are your regular work hours. And then we've got this 2-hour awesome wellness course at the end of the day that you guys can do. It's free. It's gonna be from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. where you can learn how to take better care of your mental health. Isn't that fantastic? Look at how much we're supporting resident wellness. And so we said that here's what we found. The core finding from the program is you have to make it a part of their job. You can't add it on. It can't be optional. It has to be replacing actual work. And so this was something that we got a lot of pushback on. But what we ultimately found is that like, it's kind of bizarre, but like when people replaced actual patient care or other kinds of documentation or things like that with this wellness program, it actually succeeded quite a bit. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but the basic thing that we discovered is that wellness is not something that has to be done by an employee outside of work hours. In order for like employee wellness to actually be effective, it's something that must be taken care of as part of their job. It's not something extra. It's not something additional. It's something that has to be systemically implemented into the job. And the SMART program isn't the only example of this. So like the bizarre thing is I've done this work with a lot of different companies now. So I've done it like at investment banks, private equity firms, tech companies. We do this kind of work with streamers and stuff like that. And what we've essentially discovered is that the industry accepting responsibility for improving the employee work conditions is the best solution to burnout. And a lot of people in the industry are very concerned about this, right? Because they're like, oh, like if my doctors are not seeing people for 2 hours a day, that means that we're going to make less money. And so like industries tend to be very resistant to it. And the thing is, they're dumb. Because the truth is that when you implement like wellness initiatives, which may not look like meditation, by the way, I'll give you guys a great example of this. It actually like tends to improve like employee happiness, and it actually makes you money. So I'm going to give you guys a great example of this. Once again, from medicine, okay? So one of the things that's the most annoying about being a doctor is that you have to write notes. And so like writing notes used to be good. Like it used to be like a useful thing that as a doctor, I want to remember things for myself, or I have colleagues who are going to like, be looking at my notes because they're taking care of a patient overnight. So the purpose of a note used to be to like transmit useful information from like one person to another person, or even from one, like to write it down so you can remind yourself the next day. Okay, so this person had a fever this day. I gave him this medication. It seemed to get better. Okay, good to know. So over time, though, what's happened is notes have become like a tool for billing. So now, like, we all get oriented on, we go through these seminars where there's like some hospital administrator that says, if you add these 6 sentences to your note, we can bill at a higher level and the hospital will make more money. So now notes are becoming like a useless pile of garbage that's used for the sake of like billing insurance. And this is also, it's mind-numbingly boring as a physician because I have to write all this useless crap that has nothing to do with patient care so that I can bill at a higher rate and I can get bonus and the hospital can make more money. So when you talk to doctors about, what do they dislike about their job, what burns them out, and they'll say things like, it's like insurance and like note writing. So then some hospitals were actually really forward thinking and they're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to hire a scribe. So they actually asked the doctors, they said, like, what would be useful for you? And like the doctors are like, it would be great if I didn't have to write notes. So instead what the hospital actually did is that like some hospitals have done this and now it's becoming more commonplace. They actually hire a separate person who accompanies the doctor. And they have like a laptop. They have like a little laptop that they carry around. They carry a stool. Like some of them will literally carry a stool. So the doctor walks in and then there's like the patient sitting there. The doctor sits there. There's some rando there with a laptop and a stool. They unfold their stool. They sit down and they start typing as the doctor is talking. And what people have discovered is that like having this scribe, which may cost $20 an hour, it's a whole different person that you have to hire and train and stuff like that. So there's an upfront cost. It actually works wonders because what happens is that the doctor doesn't have to spend time writing notes anymore, right? So now this like you have this peon who's like doing all this like crappy note writing that allows you to bill at a higher rate. You pay $20 an hour more. And the cool wild thing is that not only is the doctor happier because they don't have to spend as much time writing stupid crap, they also can see more patients. So what you're actually allowing a doctor to do is operate at what's called the top of their license, which is like, instead of seeing 10 patients and writing notes for 1 hour, I can see 11 patients and write notes for like 10 minutes. And it's actually a win-win like all around. And this is what I've seen time and time and time again, is that employers and industries that sort of take the burnout of their employees seriously and are willing to actually implement systemic change from a workplace environment perspective are the ones that actually win, which is why it's so like bizarre to me that like people are so resistant to this, that it's kind of crazy that like in industries right now, like success around burnout is possible. You can actually support the health and well-being of your employees in the workplace. And like, even if it negatively impacts your bottom line, like you can absolutely do it. And I would bet money that even if you did that, even if you're seeing like some kind of upfront cost, over time, you'll see like more productivity. But it's bizarre to me that it's essentially what's going on in the world right now is that you have like industries and corporations that are outsourcing their the mental health of their employees. They're not like taking any responsibility for it. And they're sort of like going to HR and they're like, hey, our employees are complaining about burnout. Like, what should we do? Like, and then the HR person is like, the HR person can't say like, oh, we have to like, let them work from home. Like, there's another good example where, COVID has shown us that work from home basically works. Like, you don't see a huge negative impact in productivity and people really like it. And now what's happening is corporations are forcing their employees to come back in for like corporate culture, which like, what corporate culture are you trying to reinforce? Like toxicity and like having your employees spend 2 hours in traffic every day because you want them to sit in a cubicle and do the same work that they can do from home? Like, are you trying to get 40 hours of labor out of someone when the truth is that they could do the same job in 30 hours and have 10 hours off and like it won't affect your bottom line at all? It's just stupid. Like, there's just so much idiocy, and it's like a systemic problem that people are thinking that, workplace mental health is on the responsibility of the worker. Like, it's dumb. Like in the original definition of burnout, like I'm serious, if you go and you look at the original definition of burnout, what separated it from depression is that it's caused from factors related to work. And if we want to fix this problem, it's not like increasing your meditation apps and like giving everyone organic produce. It's actually making changes within the workplace. And the other mind-numbing thing that like is just crazy is that making changes in the workplace is actually like good for the workplace. Like, it's dumb that like every organization that I've gone to, let me just think about that. Yeah, I think I can say every organization that I've gone to, and we've implemented like a burnout, like mental wellness kind of plan that involves like those things being structured into part of their job is like, has been successful. And generally speaking, I've never heard from a company, and we have like good relations with these people, right? And they usually call us back and want us to do more and things like that. We've never heard from a company that like, hey, this is actually negatively hurting our bottom line, and like, we don't think that this is a good intervention. Like, I've never heard that before. And it's all kinds of things from like, even like, there was one hospital I was working at where like we decided that we were going to like meditate together every morning during rounds. Or that the first 10 minutes of the day was like everyone on the unit getting together with all the patients and offering like a group meditation that patient and staff can do together. And then you start rounds 10 minutes late. But the good news is that since everyone's like on the same like wavelength and everyone's kind of like calmed down and like chilled out, like even the patients are chill, like the staff is chill, like rounds moves faster. It's not like this 2.5 hour slog where everyone's like more efficient because they all meditated at the beginning of rounds. It's crazy. So, I know that like there's a lot of stuff like the anti-work subreddit is growing really rapidly, and like I can see why, because the simple truth of the matter is that there's a gigantic scam that's being perpetrated right now, and there are all kinds of people that are part of it, including like the medical industry, because what we've managed to do is define burnout as an individual problem. People will say, I am burnt out. What should I do about it? And the truth is that there are some things that you can do. More recent research, like for example, over the last decade, research shows that burnout's actually 50-50, that half of it seems to be workplace-related stuff and the other half is like maybe not workplace-related stuff. So, research is still evolving. But at the end of the day, I think like the biggest issue is that we're placing the responsibility of burnout on the individual as opposed to the company taking some degree of responsibility. And as long as this is going on, we can have as many meditation apps as you want. We can discover other kinds of superfoods and super grains and super probiotic kimchi related sodas and whatever. Like, you can have as much health food related stuff as you want to. But at the end of the day, until employers start accepting responsibility that maybe part of the reason that my employees are burnt out has something to do with the way that their job is structured, this problem is going to continue to get worse. And like the employers are going to be the ones that suffer too, because like the other stupid thing is that it's really like a win-win situation. It's just like having happier employees means like more productive employees, and more productive employees means that it's like good for organizations. So like for those of y'all that are in situations where, your workplace isn't ideal, like my condolences, and be really, really careful about drawing the line between what you can do and what you're responsible for, and honestly, like what needs to change at your job. And because like the truth of the matter is that like, there's no amount of like personal stuff that you can do to really fix a bad work situation. Questions? Yeah, so people are saying like some people gotta go, right? Like just quit. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like, so in the United States, there's all this talk of a labor shortage. There isn't a labor shortage. There's like a wage shortage, right? There's an overabundance of crappy jobs that people are no longer willing to put up with. And so like it's not a problem of labor. It's not like they're like, I mean, I'm sure that some of it is labor related. Like people, a lot of people died from COVID. A lot of people have like, medical complications from COVID and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like it's not a labor shortage. It's just like people are not willing. Once you figured out like, okay, I can stay at home and make $1,200, or I can work in a super toxic environment and make $1,600. Like I'm just going to pass on the toxic environment because the extra $400, the opportunity cost of that is like not worth it. Right? It's like this stupid stuff that people have at work. Like, yeah, we're not going to give you a chair because we don't want to make you lazy. And we don't want other people to feel like you're lazy. Like, what is that even based on? Is there any research that shows that if you provide an employee a chair, that people purchase less stuff? Like, where is this stuff coming from? There's so many ideas in like corporate industry that are not based in science at all. Like, it's just